Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. In today's webinar, we are going to explore a subject that is both important and interesting at the same time, and that is best employers and nation builders. The world is going through an unprecedented crisis, and like most countries, the Indian economy is also affected adversely. Businesses in many sectors are forced to operate as per the new rules set by the pandemic. To rebuild the economy, the organized sector and particularly large organizations will take up a significant part of the responsibility. In today's webinar, we will explore the questions around what does it take to contribute to nation building and what can organizations do in order to engage in nation building. We have conceptualized today's agenda in three parts. We will start with the opening remarks on the theme, followed by a panel discussion, and we'll end with a Q&A session with our esteemed guests in the panel. During the course of the panel discussion, you may keep logging in your questions in the question box that you have on your screen toolbar. With that, may I introduce the first session, that's the opening remarks by Dr. Santrup Mishra. Dr. Mishra, as many of you would know, is the CEO of the Carbon Black business and the Director of Chemicals and Fertilizers business in the Aditya Birla Group. He is also the Director of Group Human Resources. Dr. Mishra has served on the boards of several companies, both in the public and private sector domains, and many of them are really nation builders. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Dr. Mishra in conversation with Prasenjit Bhattacharya, CEO, Great Place to Work Institute, India.
Dr. Mishra, welcome to this webinar, and it's a great honor and privilege to have you with us. You, of course, don't need any introduction. You are the doyen of not just human resources, but management in this country. And you have had the opportunity to observe some of the great organizations. Your own group is one such. What we are attempting to do at Great Place to Work is create awareness that in this country there are organizations who we are calling as nation builders, who now have an even more important role to play in context of what is happening at this point in time. So I would like to invite you to share your thought process on what is the country going through at this point in time, and in context of that, who is a nation builder and why do you think nation building is important even for organizations and for companies?
Very well. Thank you, Prasenjit. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and good to see you, and always good to hear about all the great things that Great Places to Work Institute is doing globally and particularly in India. I think institution building is never easy. When you build an institution, also you build a nation, and I think I compliment you and your colleagues for choosing a subject like nation building at a time perhaps we all are struggling with a range of emotions. So let me first of all say that the current context, like any other time, perhaps is as important and relevant for a subject like nation building. Before independence, post-independence, I think the task of nation building has been going on in this country. I think nation building is an activity that never ends, never ceases, because there is never a final point, because it's an infinite opportunity and potential to build a nation. But at this particular point in time, I think few things become very important. One is that India has been an aspirational society with a high level of demographic dividend, with young people who have had the benefit of and the gift of education, access to opportunity, and India has emerged as a strong economic power, as a democracy. And obviously, this young population was looking forward to a great life ahead of realizing their full potential. But this entire crisis currently has perhaps slowed it down and put a stop to it, certainly decelerated, and in many ways has raised questions in people's mind as to what's the future. A lot of our MSME currently are under pressure, either of repaying debt or safely operating themselves or operating with a cost structure that could perhaps be competitive. The uncertainties all around, even big corporations that had a lot of long-term strategy had perhaps placed orders for equipment with equipment suppliers, but currently, because of the slump in demand, do not know whether to bring in new capacity. So career aspirations, individual development aspirations, investors' return aspirations, entrepreneurs, the whole fire in the belly to build something, all of this are going through a period of uncertainty. So it's very important that one kind of pauses, reflects, goes back to discussing the concept of nation building at this point in time. So I think, therefore, I think suddenly one is kind of at a crossroad to ask, how much do I think of myself, or can I grow irrespective of my ecosystem not growing with me? Or should we all be thinking about a broader thing called building the society, the economy, and the nation at this point in time? So therefore, the subject is very relevant, it's very timely, it's very germane to our existence at this point. But one important question there comes is that what exactly is nation building? You know,
Yes.
and nation building perhaps is at a more basic level, where every individual, every institution, perhaps doing their civic duty, whether it is tax paying, whether it is voting in an election, from as basic as that, or respecting the rule of law. And all of these, in some ways, are very small contributions to nation building. Because if you do not do your civic duty, the basics, I do not think the nation can be built. But moving from there to the bigger issues, that how is the nation built? I think the nation is built through great education, great healthcare, human rights, a lot of capacity building, I think a lot of institution building. A nation is built through investment into different parts of a country to make sure that there is regional balanced development, bringing in the weaker and the marginal sections and the economic backward into the mainstream of the organizations, preservation of the tradition, history, culture of an organization, your basic cottage industry, preservation of your skills that have been traditionally strong, uh, keeping people connected to the ecosystem and their own kind of habitat, whereby they are able to kind of bond with nature and preserve some of their traditional occupations, medicines, yet at the same time, having access to things that are modern, whether it is satellite technology into agriculture, whether it is quantum computing. So I think investment into all of these elements, complex and simple, multi-sectoral, targeted at different segments of society, and even for that matter, at a time of national calamity, be it a kind of flood or a cyclone or a pandemic, coming to support the stranded, those suffering, coming to the aid of the government to deliver kind of better services to the citizens, coming together to, in any manner, one can bring support either to the government or to the communities or people. There can be a range of things that can be done about nation building. So I think it would be a misnomer to believe that any individual institution or organization or business will be able to prosper without its entire ecosystem or the country as a whole doing well. Because you grow, if you remember that famous kind of story that goes around about this American corn grower, that he had this top quality corn seeds, and he not only was planting it in his own field, but was distributing it to his neighbors to plant it as well. When somebody asked them that, are you not creating competition? He said, can I therefore grow healthy corn in my field when it is all infested by insects all around me? It's not possible. So for me to grow, my entire ecosystem must equally be strong. I think there is a strong lesson there that you cannot be self-interest driven, very narrowly focused. Self entire focus cannot be about I, me, and myself. You need to, in many ways, contribute to the environment and the ecosystem around you, be it the economy, be it the society, be it the education, be it governance. All of this to improve for you to prosper. And all of these, when they improve, these are different facets of nation building.
You know, there have been so many great examples of nation building in our own country. For example, and I'm reminded of some of the Maharatnas because we work closely with quite a few of them. When you have to provide energy and fuel at Siachen Glacier, you know, it is a nation builder who is there, and it is not about profits. It is about making sure that what has to be done is done. When you have to ensure that every fourth bulb in the country is lit, and that's a nation builder again. And all of them are businesses. They are legitimate businesses. They have a top line, they have a bottom line, but they all seem to have a higher purpose. Now, if some people might even argue that it is not the business of business to do nation building. In fact, there would be a set of people who at this point in time are looking at government for SOPs, for tax rebates, for all kinds of support. Now, is it something which you know, you'd think is not a rational argument, that let us focus on running our business well and pay taxes and leave the nation building to the government? And or do you think it is not good enough for every citizen has to play a role?
Well, that's a fantastic question, Prasenjit. First of all, let's understand that we do not live in an either or world today. And I think many things have to simultaneously progress. The moment I run my business well, I create employment, I create further potential to reinvest or invest, I do act in the interest of the country or the nation, I am doing nation building. Let's understand. Every for-profit business, when contributes a penny to tax, contributes one additional employment, brings one productive capacity, does skill building, it does enhance the capacity of the nation. So let there be no confusion on that. You talked about Maharatnas. You know, I think sometimes in our anxiety to be critical, perhaps we often do not give the due where it is kind of most logical to be given. But before I go to the Maharatnas, and of course, I myself personally had a great privilege of being an independent director on the board of ONGC, and I have had close acquaintance of seeing some of these Maharatnas operate. And I must tell you, the day we had a board meeting on the Bombay High platform, and standing there, surrounded by this mass of water, when I looked out and I asked myself, who would have in independent India come and constructed a platform in the middle of the sea to generate oil and gas, but for the public sector organizations, but for the sponsorship of the government or with taxpayers' money or whatever you may call it. But I think some of the vital infrastructure of this country has been created equally by private sector and also public sector. You know, let's not forget when late G.D. Birla, the grand patriarch of the Birla family, went to a remote place you wouldn't have heard of called Renu Sagar and set up a 600 megawatt power plant, perhaps there to support his aluminium plant in the interior place of Uttar Pradesh in those days. That was nation building. That was creating self-reliance in aluminium production. That was bringing new technology, education, livelihood, modernity, urbanization to a very interior rural area of India. When he set up, for example, Birla Institute of Science and Technology, now that was nation building. So I think the Maharatnas, or for example, I was the chairman of the governing board of NIT Rourkela. Across the border, when I see the Rourkela steel plant, the Steel Authority of India, you know, having set up a huge steel plant, you know, many, you know, backward areas, they set it up. I think all of these were acts of nation building.
No, absolutely. And And it is very interesting that when I look at the nation builders in the private sector, you find almost without exception that core ideology of doing something for the society. So Tata Steel is an organization that is going to be there in our webinar, and we have HDFC Bank is now certified as a great place to work. So what strikes me is that it's not just that they are doing something for the nation, but their employees are feeling so proud being a part of this kind of an organization. So a power grid, an Indian oil, and very few, I mean, not everyone realizes that a great place to work is not that great multi-cuisine cafeteria and the massage chairs that media keeps talking about. And some of these organizations also have great facilities, but it is the pride in the difference you are making to the lives of other people that your organization is making, how much trust you have in your own management, and do you enjoy the company of your colleagues. And in that context, when we created this category, best employers among nation builders, we wanted to also highlight the fact that nation builders, one of the things they do really, really well is to be a nursery for talent, because there was a lot of expertise and competencies which did not exist. I mean, where was our ability to go and do something in Bombay High? I'm talking about the sheer technical competencies before, you know. So in that context, do you see a link between nation builders also being a great place to work or a nursery for talent?
Well, I think, nation building is also a mindset. And the mindsets are created at three places. One is within your family, second is within your educational system, and third place where you build mindset is your workplace. And most of your productive life as you spend in your workplace. And that mindset of pursuing a higher purpose beyond the kind of limited purpose of profitability or productive use of resources, etc. I think that kind of mindset can be created in your employees by you yourself being an icon of excellence, uh, an icon of standard, an icon of benchmark. And when your employees work with you, like all these companies that you mentioned, I think not just them, people before them and people after them. People before them have built it, they are preserving it, people after them will carry it forward. When we talk about nation builders, I think one of the aspects we ignore is brand. And great employer brand, when you are certified as a great place to work, I think that great employer brand also is an intangible wealth of the nation, because when you go out of the country and you flash your visiting card and people have heard of your organization, recognize your organization, that brand is an intangible nation building that you have done, because that's what countries are proud of, and the people are proud of. And of course, what you mentioned about capacity building, capability building, talent building, I think all great places to work, their one focus is they are great places to work not simply because they have physical infrastructure, but they are great places to work because they help people realize their full potential. So I'm not surprised that these companies featured in your list, and I congratulate them, and I hope that more successful companies who are great places to work can perhaps incubate and handhold the smaller cousins or neighbors, whatever way you describe, whether MSMEs and others. So there should be a mushrooming of great places to work, because that itself can be a core intangible asset of the nation to build that country.
So the last question I want to ask you is, can any organization actually play a role which is disproportionate to their balance sheet size? And assumption is there is no organization that does not exist to fulfill a social need. And by and large, most of them are fulfilling a positive social needs. how can one become a nation builder? What would be those three, four, five characteristics that one can look for or that you can build?
Well, I think one is to ask yourself that what is unique or what is your strength. I think playing to your strength itself is a great way to contribute to nation building. Going beyond your strength to ask yourself, what are the unique opportunities of nation building that are around you that you are passionate about? Because once you are passionate, you have a conviction about something and you plug into that, it has a multiplier effect in terms of your energy. So, instead of finding out what is fashionable today to contribute to, you got to ask, what are you passionate about? And once your passion, even if it is not a strength of yours, your passion you connect with. So every organization perhaps needs to involve its employees to discover what are you all passionate about. Let's all do something about that. I think that could be a second way of nation building. The third way of nation building would be that to identify unique needs of the nation at this point in time. For example, if you remember at the early stage of uh, COVID-19, when there was shortage of masks and PPEs, the very fact that certain small entrepreneurs could change their own manufacturing process, etc., to convert their capacity. Again, I think identifying the need and asking yourself with a little bit of a tweak or innovation, can you plug into that current need of a nation? That could be a third way of doing this. And finally, and most importantly, I believe that it is not the size of your balance sheet, it is not your size of your P&L statement, it is not your retained earnings, it is not your gross block. I think those do not necessarily lead to delivering or achieving great things. All those visionaries who went to remote areas of India, those examples I gave you, of setting up capacity at a time when nobody would have dared to. I think that kind of vision itself and that courage itself is a great way of nation building, because that courage and that vision does not come out of a great balance sheet of P&L. It comes from the core desire of yours to contribute to nation building.
Absolutely. And, the last thing that I would say is that our aim at Great Place to Work is to create initially 100 role models under this category of best employers in nation builders, and then uh, get people to shift in terms of a mindset that where today we are all armchair experts on COVID, on economy, on politics, and on whether we were very fortunate. We are just that 7% of the workforce who happen to be working in a environment where it is far more secure and stable and so on and so forth. If this 7% can make a real big impact on the remaining 93% and judge less and help more. But the reality is the time has come for everyone to play a role in nation building, and we are definitely going to recognize and celebrate the top 100 nation builders in the country. Any last thoughts or comments from your side before we end?
Well, I think, first of all, I wish you all good luck in, nurturing and bringing together this 100 nation builders as you put them. But I think the final thoughts has to be that the spirit of India always has been about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the world is my family. And India has always believed in, as a community, growing together. I think that unique spirit of Indianness, we need to bring more and more to the fore to be able to not just build this nation and this country that's so great and has given us all so much, but also to be very great citizens of the world, because the world of the future would be an ecosystem in which India would be growing. So therefore, if the world doesn't grow, India by itself growing is not going to be sustainable. Same thing as we talked about in context of a firm or an institution, that the ecosystem has to grow. So not only we grow to be great nation builders, but we should also grow to be great globe builders. And for that, I think our mindset should always keep on moving and expanding by learning from other great institutions and successful organizations that you are putting in your list. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Misra. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra, for sharing your thoughts with such lucidity. Moving on to our key session for this webinar, which is panel discussion. Today, we have three distinguished guests amidst us, and it is my privilege to introduce them, starting with the lady on the panel, introducing Dr. Alka Mittal, the Director HR of Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India. Dr. Mittal has had an illustrious journey with ONGC for 33 years across diverse roles and assignments. She is the first woman functional director of the company in its entire history. Under Dr. Mittal's leadership, ONGC became one of the top companies in the country in the area of CSR. Dr. Mittal has had a PhD in corporate governance. Our next esteemed guest is Mr. Suresh Dutt Tripathi. Mr. Tripathi is the Vice President Human Resources Management of Tata Steel and comes with rich and varied experience across multiple industry sectors ranging from steel and chemicals to IT and education, both in the public and private domains. Mr. Tripathi has many prestigious accreditations from Oxford, Cambridge, UC Berkeley, and the IIMs. He serves on the boards of various organizations like Tata Steel Utilities and Infrastructure Services, Indian Iron and Steel Sector Skill Council, and the European Center for Executive Development, France. And finally, introducing our special guest of honor for today, Dr. Anil Khandelwal. Dr. Khandelwal is the former chairman and managing director of Bank of Baroda and Dena Bank. He is known for his pioneering work in transforming Bank of Baroda into a valuable brand. He is an international keynote speaker on leadership, governance, and transformation. He is also the author of a couple of best-selling books, namely Dare to Lead, and the more recent one, CEO, Chess Master, or Gardener. Dr. Khandelwal has served on the boards of many organizations and is currently a senior strategic advisor with KPMG India. May I extend a very warm welcome to all our esteemed guests and request them to switch on their webcams and microphones and join the session. Today's discussion will be facilitated by Prasenjit Bhattacharya, the CEO of Great Place to Work Institute, India. At the end of the discussion, we will have a Q&A session. Please do start sending your questions to the organizers by typing them in the question box appearing on your toolbar. The facilitator will pose those questions to the panelists on your behalf. Over to you, Prasenjit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Basuri, and thank you to all the esteemed panelists. And we are extremely privileged at Great Place to Work that we have the opportunity to actually interact with great organizations, great people. And today we are hoping to have a rich conversation on the topic, which is about nation builders. And I'm going to start by asking Dr. Khandelwal this question. Dr. Khandelwal, sir, your entire life is only about nation building. So I don't even know where to start because there is no start and no stop. I remember very few people actually know that you have a human resource background. And when you inherited the chairmanship of Bank of Baroda, at that point in time, things were not looking very good. And a lot of people were commenting, public sector hai, productivity hoga, union hai, this, that, and the other. And today, of course, in the avatar, the new avatar of Bank of Baroda, it's the third largest bank in the country. But more than that, even after retiring from Bank of Baroda, you actually redoubled your effort through various boards, to various forums in terms of contributing to the economic development of this country, to contribute to nation building. Today, when we see so many industrialists going to the government and maybe rightly so, asking them for support, what is your opening remarks, Dr. Khandelwal, about the necessity or the need to have nation builders in this country?
The question has the answer itself, because I think all of us are nation builders. All employees are nation builders. There's nothing, I think that is the fundamental, most fundamental thing, that each person is a nation builder. So there is nothing unique about it. The uniqueness lies in who are able to do, who are able to perform, who are able to do the visioning about the nation building. And I think most important out of everything is the leadership for nation building. Whether it is at organizational level, it is at municipal level. To give you an example, several years after plague in Surat, which was at that time the dirtiest city of India, one bureaucrat is remembered, Mr. Rao, who was administrator of Surat and eventually became the cleanest city. Likewise, I can give you hundreds of examples of organization. Mr. V. Krishnamurthy was in SAIL, Bharat Heavy Electricals. Many of these organizations today have slided in terms of performance and other things. They are all being talked about. So there are a whole lot of people in different walks of life that they provide leadership for nation building. Somehow, when we talk of nation, we think of government, we think of politicians. Nation building is done through the instrumentality, as I repeat, of leadership in organizations. And this is where today the word is deficit of leadership. In fact, the famous leadership writer Warren Bennis said, the world has less threat from nuclear armament than the deficit leadership. Such is the danger of deficit leadership in the world. And therefore, it's very, very important we can lay down an ecosystem of what, and very rightly and very brilliantly, Santrupta did that this is all leadership development. But I think the leadership role is, how do you create an education system which contributes to nation building? How do you create public health system that does not flounder at the time of crisis? How do you create X, Y, Z? We have achieved a lot, but I think it's very important that we create leaders for nation building. And I can tell you something with my experience of working largely in public sector, that we in public sector, when we talk, we forget about 60% of 70% of foot soldiers. They are the people who like your, I think, army in front. They know the answers, they know the problems, they are directly in touch with the customers, and yet it's all about number crunching. Let me comment that in order to become nation builders, you have to keep number crunching not as first priority. So I always say the business of CEO is not to do business, but to create intangibles for the organization. The culture, the human resources, the governance, the brand, and a whole lot of such things. I was quite surprised, coming from human resource background, that I focused on these, and I was surprised that within the very first year, the growth was phenomenal. And therefore, in my book, I have written, one of my leadership code is, when you work on intangibles, tangibles are the natural outcomes. It surprises you. But what happens when you have a short-term view of number crunching, next Monday, next all your meetings, and these days work from home, I think nothing wrong. Numbers are important. They are the lifeblood. But if you are obsessed, you forget many other things. And therefore, your journey in organization is up and down. Sometimes you are up, sometimes you are down, sometimes again you are up, you are down. I think nation building is neither a technology play alone. Nation building is not even an investment play. Nation building is people's play. It is a leadership play. That's what, by way of my, preliminary
No,
comments.
absolutely. And I think it is very clear today that if you are a CEO, if you are a leader, people may not remember your predecessor, they may not remember your successor, but they will never forget you. They will never forget what you did right now, today, in this pandemic situation in COVID-19. And therefore, you have a historic opportunity. And it is in context of these that when we look at large organizations like ONGC, for example, I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, if I remember correctly, 77% of crude oil in the country, maybe over 80% of natural gas. And this is one company which is managing all of that. And I have seen something common across some of these Maharatnas in the government, and I'm going to talk about Tata Steel next. But what is it? What is common is a very strong culture, because their CEOs change, their directors change, they have a new cadre that comes every now and then, but that culture and that commitment to creating something for the nation is sustained. And I wonder how that happens. And therefore, Alkaji, we would like to know a little bit more from you about the ONGC case study and how has this organization, and maybe some examples of your contribution to nation building beyond the obvious, crude oil, and how have you fostered the kind of culture that makes your people feel that it is a great workplace as well?
Very good morning to all, and special regards to Dr. Anil Khandelwal, sir. I heard you when I was at Mumbai in 2002, if I remember correctly, and it was an HR professionals forum. So I knew that you are a person who's a hardcore HR person who went on to become the CMD of Bank of Baroda, of course. So special regards. I convey special regards to you. Prasanjit ji, thank you for having me over. And Suresh ji, I'm looking forward to listening from you, because Tata Group is one group which is always held in very high esteem by all of us. And when coming to ONGC, we came up in 1956. That was the time when the industrial policy resolution came up, as a result of which there were certain sectors in the country which were kept as the responsibility of the public sector. But simultaneously, there were other sectors which were equally important in the manufacturing arena, which were kept for very well established corporate leaders, I would say, family owned businesses, but which were very highly principled and value driven companies like Tata's, Birla's, and some of the really established business houses. So when ONGC came up, we came up with a handful of experts, I would say, those who were explorers, hunters, gatherers, kind of. We were a small group which was there, established at Dehradun in sheds, and they were going across the country in search for oil. And today, what ONGC is, out of the 7 basins which are established, 6 have been established by ONGCians, I would say. And I always feel and take lots of pride in the fact that the ONGCians who were there, part of the founding I would say the founding fathers or pioneers of ONGC, they were not working for the paycheck that they were getting at the end of the month. It was a very meager amount, but what they were working for with total passion and commitment was that they were foot soldiers of ONGC, working in remotest areas where there was no sign of economic development. They were in all corners of the country, in jungles. They were going in search of, while exploring locations which could be potentially oil giving to the country. Idea was, their one mission was that they have to make our country self-reliant in the arena of energy. And for that they would go to any level to succeed at it. So when this began, this journey of ONGC began from we have numbers from 1956 to 1980. The government of India contributed, invested, I would say, in this company around 342 crores. And I take lots of pride in the fact that over time, while we should not be churning out numbers, as Khandelwal sir has very well said, but when we are in the business, we need to create value as well. So the kind of value we have been able to create for the nation is 10 lakh crore, over 10 lakh crore. And that is what gives ONGC the feeling of satisfaction that, okay, our energy soldiers, all the effort they put in right from the initial period till the day, the youngsters who are coming out from IITs and different organizations of repute like BITS and other organizations, they are always committed towards getting the best for this nation. And this is what keeps us so satisfied and makes us so proud of being a part of this organization. And that's why you will see, Prasanjit, that the employee turnover in this company is very small, because a person who joins ONGC remains with ONGC, because that person remains committed towards nation building and creating an organization which will continue to contribute towards nation building. So that is what
Yeah.
I would say. As far as ONGC is concerned, we became a Navratna. Lots of pride was taken by us in that, because we were seen as potential global giants which could compete in the international market, in the international arena. We do have ONGC Videsh Limited, and today in our group we have two Maharatnas, ONGC and HPCL, and we have two other Schedule A companies, which is MRPL and ONGC Videsh Limited, and we have other JVs which are again contributing in the related areas of business for ONGC. And we are all committed towards growth for the company, for the group, and for the nation. Ultimate objective is, yes.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes,
there's
yes,
a little
sorry.
bit of a lag. What I would be very interested, and I'll come back to you in the second round of our conversation, is from a HR strategy point of view, what went into making ONGC a great workplace for the employees. I think very few people actually realize that the kind of opportunities that one can have for learning in an organization like an ONGC is unparalleled. It is very, very difficult for smaller organizations to do that. The sense of pride, because it's a basic sector, you are really directly impacting the financial viability of the entire country, not just one organization. By the way, that kind of return on investment that the government of India has got, I have not seen in any share market anywhere else in the world. So it's a really good investment that the government made, the 350 plus crores that they had invested. And I think very few people also know that ONGC and other Maharatnas have a culture of not looking at budgets when it comes to helping out an employee. So if somebody is in a remote area, meets with an accident or has an illness or something which is life-threatening, they will do whatever it takes. And there is no questions asked. There is no bureaucracy that people keep complaining about when they think about public sector. Yeah, Anil, my question to you was, why is it important for us to talk about corporates being nation builders? That's the same question I also asked Dr. Santrup Misra, saying that life is tough. Right now, it is tougher than most other situations. Somehow managing our business seems to be such a tough job. And on top of it, now we are talking about nation builders. Are we living in some kind of make-believe world, or is it possible not only for the Maharatnas and the Bank of Baroda type of organizations, but can a small organization also be a nation builder? Is it required? If so, why is it required?
Yeah, it is very much required. It is in the interest of such organizations themselves, if they want to perpetuate in the future, if they want to move from being mere organization to institutions, that they survive several hundred years, that they leave legacy, it is in their own interest that they become nation builders. They are not, if they want to remain purely in a short-term trading game and all that, but those organizations who want to grow, this growth must have an ecosystem. And this ecosystem is that this growth has to be a growth that will live, that will perpetuate for generations. And it is in the interest of such organizations, because when they think big, they innovate, they bring quality, they bring competition, they meet competition, they develop the competencies inside, they develop capabilities, they compete, they go abroad. So therefore, it is in their own interest, if they want to, unless they say that we are here to make money in 3 years and pack up. I'm not talking of those kind of organizations. I'm talking of serious organizations who want to remain in the business of business. In that sense, it is in their self-interest to contribute to national development, finding new opportunities, finding new, imagining new products, reimagining their businesses, innovate. And all these things are connected to building capacities, the human capabilities, the governance system, the culture, that they grow from small to global type organizations. So it is in their own interest that they do it.
In fact, when I was talking to Dr. Misra before the conversation today, he talked about the fact that they run 52 schools, 50,000 children. There are 500 villages who are becoming Atmanirbhar, in the sense that the villages are not financially dependent on the outside ecosystem. Now, all of this looks like corporate social responsibility. But if I want to build a business for sustainability, if I want to build this business for my children and my grandchildren, then this is the way to build a business. You cannot build a business with a very short-term thinking. And that was what Jamshedji Tata thought about. I don't know how many years ago. Suresh, will just take another shot if you're, if we can hear you now.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Great. So thank you, Prasenjit. Thank you for having me on this panel. And it's an honor to share the platform with Dr. Khandelwal, and wonderful to hear Dr. Dr. Alka. It was good to hear about the OHGC background and return on investment. I think that's a wonderful ROI that anybody can have. I think, a lot has been already shared about nation building. And I think in Tata Steel, the very foundation was, it came from the thought of nation building. And that's where Jamshedji Tata, he started by thinking that steel is something that needs to be produced in the country. Then only the country can become strong and independent. And this is something which is very core required for building a nation. So I think starting itself was nation building, and hence everything that came along with it was focused on building nation. Another thought, and I think that became a part of our philosophy running through the organization, is that business, as he had mentioned, it is basically, it doesn't have to see the community as one of the stakeholder, but the very existence of business is for community, which means if you exist, the community should get the benefit of your existence. And I think if you look at any great nation, what is it? I mean, why do you call a nation a great nation? And if you look at the elements, it starts off from being a society which has a whole lot of good corporate citizens. The larger number of corporate citizens are there in a society. And then you create an ecosystem around that so that they are feeding onto each other to grow, develop, improve, and constantly innovate to become better and evolve. So all these elements, I think, are the ones which are to be kept at the core of any organization. And I think that is where everything else that happened, starting from this vision of nation building. So it also brought in the whole sense of purpose in every individual in the organization that we are building nation. So it's something like, what is told that when you look at something, then you look at the end result, then the energies multiply. That when you start, first step, and you say you have to go only 10 steps, then you have that much of energy. But if you say that you have to go miles, then first step takes you to the next step, to the third step, because that energizes. And I think that is what happened. The whole purpose for which Tata Steel got set up, and it was that we'll build nation. If you have the strength of steel, then everyone working in the organization carries that fervor that we have to build nation and keep doing something which builds nation.
Yeah.
And that is why, if you look at the contribution that happened in the field of community or CSR, we never were looking at number or money that would go in terms of how much you spend about CSR. But it is all about we have to. So it is the end. It is the purpose which is in mind, not the means. Means will come because of the purpose in mind. And I think that is how we started doing, and we started creating a whole lot of support system, and that gave everyone, one as the individual who's working in the organization, and everyone in the community, about the whole existence, that yes, this is needed. This whole ecosystem of Tata Steel is needed for everyone. So you start creating that center which is supported by everyone. So it is not just the existence of one organization. So I think that is exactly how we started contributing. And this over a period of time has become a part of DNA of the organization. I mean, anything happens anywhere, one doesn't have to think. There are a lot of people who want to volunteer and do a lot of things, because volunteerism, we encourage people that, you're working here, it's fine. But it may be that we are somewhere a little privileged as compared to somebody who needs you more. So if whenever somebody needs you more, you should be there. And you should always be on the forefront of doing something. Now this, as a part of the organization culture, creates that, the energy within the organization of doing something for everybody else, going for the community, and anything, anywhere, any kind of any support needed, people are there to contribute in whatever way it is possible. And I think current situation of COVID, you have seen, I think Tata as a group has been one of in the forefront of making sure that something which is needed for the society across different geographies in the country, we should be first to set it up. We have done every bit in terms of making sure that anything which comes in the way of community getting getting any kind of issues which will lead to problems later, we should be there to take care of them. So, right from some small steps of individuals going out and feeding everyone in the community to setting up hospitals and COVID structure. Right now, we are in the midst of an experiment in Jamshedpur where we are trying to create a testing protocol with respect to, we have a whole lot of experts, and we are trying different kind of testing protocols which can help us create an algorithm which will help the whole country in terms of finding out, can we identify more vulnerable, more risky set of people, and if you contain them, then the whole COVID can be contained. And we are focusing on it. Right now, we have done testing for almost 6,000 people. We are doing for many years. So I'm just saying that it has nothing to do with business, nothing to do with steel. But actually, the thought process that comes in is that what are we doing for the community? What are we doing for the nation? And I think that is something which,
something which I find very fascinating about many such organizations, including your organizations, is that sometimes the CEOs change, and every time a CEO changes, there could be a change in focus. Somebody may focus more on tangibles, somebody focuses more on intangibles, but the values don't change. So therefore, what you talked about are at the level of values. So Alkaji, before we end, we must get to know the last 90 days story also about how did ONGC deal with COVID-19. And I know that yours is an essential service. People would have been working. And so tell us a little bit about how did you deal with COVID-19? And do you see the future being very different from what it was in the past, even for an organization like ONGC?
Yes, Prasanjit ji, right now is the time when we are talking about COVID-19, and I use the term perplexing. This is one situation which is very perplexing and very unpredictable. That is what we started with when we started off in beginning of March. And while we were going ahead each day, ensuring that the activities go on, because we knew that while the oil prices are plummeting and we are losing out when we are producing each barrel of oil, we still had to do it for the nation, and we were doing it. And while we were doing this, we were also seeing that there are our personnel, our human resource, which is posted in the remotest of areas. They are very precious to us. We as a model employer were very, very keen that each member of our company and anyone who comes in contact with our company, whether they are secondary for workforce members or those from around the community, they should be safe during this very tough health scenario. And that is why those who are working on on-off pattern, they work in the deep offshore, what Dr. Santrup Mishra was talking about, on the offshore platforms, or in the onshore, in remote areas, on the rigs or in the installations. They are the ones who are on 14 days on-off pattern. But with the lockdown, we knew that travel would be difficult and it would not be safe for them also. So constantly we were in touch with them through video conferencing. And every 1 week when we would talk with them, they would say, let us be here for another 15 days. We'll see if situation improves. Then we can get a new set of persons to take over from us, and then we'll go home. And every time they would also say that at home, everyone understands that we are part of this organization, which is working with a larger objective, for a larger purpose. And there were 9 girls amongst them, and none of them conveyed any kind of doubt or any kind of discomfort when it came to continuing to work. They worked for 65 days. And when the new set of personnel were taken through chartered flights to Mumbai High and to other onshore locations, everyone who came out of the offshore or from the onshore locations was coming back with the satisfaction that, okay, they have earned their stay at home, which they were going to get now. And those who were going for duty were equally determined to prove their worth. In fact, some of them were calling up, that I have not received a call for going for duty. How will I go and relieve my colleagues who are there in the offshore or on the onshore platform, onshore installations? So this was the spirit with which they were working. And what drives them, what makes them be this way? I'll just take you back to the times, when the ONGC was coming up, when the Bombay offshore, we stuck oil at the offshore installation in the Mumbai High. That was the time when we had Mr. T.N. Seshan as our director personnel. He was the first director personnel of ONGC. And we had Mr. N.B. Prasad, who was a Padma Shri. He was the one who was steering this organization. He was CMD. And these were the founding persons who established the kind of way forward which would make sure that our employees remain as engaged, as committed towards I would say towards the task of nation building as anyone else does in this country. And this has continued. Even today, all our directors on the board of ONGC and OVL are those who joined ONGC way back in the early 80s. I joined in 1985, as a graduate trainee. And when I joined, we were told and we were made aware of the Perspective Plan 2010. That was the time when we started looking at the longer run, at the larger picture and at the long run. And today, in 2020, we are instrumental in coming up with the Energy Strategy 2040, where we are talking about a diversified energy basket, where not only will oil and gas be there for the nation, we will be committed towards more options in the times to come. So this is the way, and what has worked for us is the kind of policies we have. We have taken care of almost all segments of our workforce and even the contractual workforce. We have this system. I think ONGC is the only company which has this provision of a fair wage package, which is given to the secondary workforce, which is much more than the minimum wages which are stipulated in different states. So this is the kind of I would say sense of care and compassion we work with, and that is what gives us all this sense of purpose, and it gives this sense of purpose to all our employees too, whether they are staff members, technicians, or they are highly qualified personnel working in the research and development institutes. Everyone is focused on one mission, that is doing as much for the company as possible.
In fact, I can see that there are a lot of questions which has come up. And by the way, two things that stand out in my mind, in what you said. One is it boils down to leadership, like Anilji said. And I mean, obviously, everyone in our generation knows about Mr. Seshan, but both the leaders have had a reputation, that people are familiar with. I also remember, Suresh, you talked to me about, can Great Place to Work do an audit of contract workmen? This was many years back when we were having a conversation, because he says that we want our contractors to be great places too. And these are people who are not on the rolls of the company, and they probably can't do something as complicated as Great Place to Work assessment, but can there be some easier way of doing that? We also have actually we have a lot of HR directors and HR heads, apart from senior executives and a few CEOs in the webinar today. And I noticed that we have from CK Birla Group, we have the director of HR, Sonu Soni, who is also amongst us. So in course of the questions, what I'll do is I'll bring up some of those people if they want to, either raise a point or answer some question. But the first question, and it is straight, very blunt question that I'm going to throw to Dr. Anil Khandelwal, and there is Ram Vinod Mishra has written this question, that, or just one second, I think Before that, there is another question that Vinayak Rawat has written, which is relevant for you. He says that we talk about leadership development, but when it comes to the owner's son and daughter, they are already developed. So therefore, why does succession planning not work for the owner's family? It has to work for everybody else.
I think those owners should answer, not me.
If you an owner, go ahead.
Enlightened owners now are first good thing which has happened is that owners are now sending for good education their children, which earlier was not happening. They are sending them abroad, they are being trained, and some enlightened owners are really not installing them in the top leadership positions. They are putting them, and mark my word, some enlightened owners. And if the others are not doing it, they do it at their own risk. And sometimes serendipitous luck helps them that they are they take the shoes of leadership. Because I also believe that leadership is only 10 to 15% formal training. Most leadership happens by observing good leaders in your own organization as much as observing bad leaders, because they hurt you the most and it leaves with you the trait that I won't be like that. So leadership is developed by observation and much more by your own experience as to what is happening, what experience you are giving to people. You are giving a tough territory experience. You are giving an experience to work with a tough and a rude boss. Is he developing resilience or is he running away? So I think it's a very conscious process of developing people on the job, developing people through, as mountains are shaped by different weather, leadership is shaped by different experiences. So it is basically an experience plate supplemented by formal training, here and there. So it's that equation.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a dilemma in the sense that I think outside of India, it was fairly clear that the ownership role and the leadership role are not necessarily same. Unfortunately, in India, we often confuse these two roles. And therefore, I'm not saying that owners cannot be leaders or leading the company in an executive capacity, but they have to recognize that both these roles are very different. And if you want to lead the company, you have to demonstrate those leadership abilities and competencies that you expect from any CEO, whether that person happens to be your son or daughter. A second quick question, Anil, to you, and then we'll come to the other two panelists on some of the HR related questions as well. The question is that how can MSMEs and MSME leaders balance nation building and the business demand of investment, resources, skills? In other words, can mid-sized companies also play a role in nation building? And what could be some practical ways in which they can support nation building, in your opinion?
You mean MSME or big size companies? I didn't.
No, MSMEs, mid-size.
Well, yeah, certainly big size MSMEs are as good as corporations in making. And the only thing is that first, they must practice good managerial practices before they get into the leadership or they get into a bigger. They must practice good management. And I need not, this is not a session where I should be telling what is good managerial practices are there. And second, especially with regard to MSMEs, given the circumstances in which they work, they are difficult circumstances. They have the payment problem from different places, including public sector with all the laws and all that. They have different kind of problems. I think MSMEs have to decide how they are going to operate. It is possible within even the difficult system to to operate within the framework of ethics. See,
Yeah.
if you talk to a MSME man, he will say this is theoretical. This may sound theoretical, but let me tell you, ethics may not count, but it matters. That is my experience. Anybody say no, they don't count, but it matters. Those who have the resilience to survive and undergo this difficult process of surviving in an environment which some people say is difficult environment, trust me, those have the makings of bringing and transcending to a bigger work, bigger corporation. There are certain silvery points for MSMEs. There always need for finance, and this happens when they start expanding beyond means. This is the many studies have revealed, I tell you, including Jim Collins' famous work, Why Great Organizations Fail. Whichever organization goes on to spree of expansion without looking at their resources, they get into this problem. MSMEs in our country are classic example, because MSMEs goes through a cycle of demand of product, the financial cycle and all that, and therefore one has to be an extremely good in managing one's resources. If I can say something before their ambition gets enlarged. Certainly, at some point of time, they would grow big, but they must go brick by brick.
Okay, so the last couple of questions before we come to an end, and I think the interesting question is maybe both Alkaji, you and Sureshji, for you as well. We are all inspired by nation building, and it's one thing to say that you go to remote areas and work in plants, but the youngsters these days, they would rather prefer to join an IT company and sit in an air-conditioned office rather than go through the kind of hardships that nation builders may often require, even though you have good infrastructure. So don't you find this dichotomy that even though you are a best employer, attracting young people to go to remote locations and what might be considered as hardship postings for some? Alkaji, you want to take a shot, and then I'll come to Sureshji.
I would just like to share that when we are going for our recruitment, while we have shared with the employee value proposition with the different institutes and different educational institutions, still when we go for recruitment, whether it is through campus or through a proper entrance exam and interview finally followed up with interview, we are very, very particular about sharing the true picture with the youngsters, because a person from an institute of repute, when he joins ONGC, he comes with a particular image that, okay, here life is going to be tough to begin with, but the satisfaction which they will get out of it will be tremendous. And that is what they should understand. In fact, initially when we had started imitating some of the other companies which were trying to draw the best of talent, we would showcase only the best part of the organization. I'm talking about at the turn of the century. But then we realized that to those who join with those false kind of impressions will not continue to be with us, or even if they continue to be with us, they will actually not be with us, because they will be totally disengaged. And that is what we did not want. And that's why we are sharing what is the life of a driller like, what is the life of a person in exploration, a geophysicist like, when we are preparing them for the interview for a position in ONGC. Even an HR person is told that he or she will have to work in the remotest of areas, and coming to corporate office or a comfortable metro posting will be something which will happen much later. And that is with this spirit only the colleagues who join us continue to be with us. And that's why attrition rate is not a cause for concern, but level of engagement is something which we keep worrying about. And that is what we keep ensuring. What Khandelwal sir very nicely said, that the tangibles, the the perks, allowances, etc., are smaller part of it, of our concern. The greater part of our concern is how intangibles are created, how we are able to have the help them identify with this organization and the purpose of this organization. And for that, we have to actually work on them when they join. And let me share with you, Prasanjit, the younger generation, whether it is at home, my daughters at home, or the youngsters in the organization, they are a very enlightened lot. They are much, much better when it comes to from the point of view of maturity of thoughts as compared to when we joined ONGC. When we joined, we knew that this is a great organization and we would like to be part of it, but there were not too many options in the private sector then. But here, these youngsters, when they choose to be with ONGC, they are here with a larger purpose. And when they see they get fulfillment in their workplace, they will not look elsewhere. And they are a satisfied lot. Only thing is, we have to keep working on them. We have to keep making them special, making them feel special and valued, because that is what matters to them. And that is what ultimately makes the organization, because they are the future of this organization. If they have long-term plans for ONGC, for being with ONGC, then only ONGC will thrive.
I think that's a great perspective. Suresh, anything you would like to add on? You have a point of view, I know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the point that you mentioned, that many youngsters today are looking for a different kind of a role, and that's why getting talent is getting a little difficult. I think in terms of issue, yes, this is an issue. There is an issue in this. But to say that it is impacting talent getting into the organization, I don't think it has much of impact. And the reason is two. One, why some of the youngsters are looking for a different kind of environment to work. It's not the environment. It's the opportunity which got created, and there will always be a set of people who are onto opportunities which are different. And that definitely reduces your size of pool. And I think that is fine, fair enough. Not necessarily the people who we want, the kind of talent that we want, is not coming to us. It is. It is also true and a fact that earlier, if the number was coming in, the stability of that number for longer period was higher as compared to today, because there are multiple other opportunities which also come on the way for youngsters. So our attrition in the initial first 3 years is higher as compared to the rest of the organization. If I can give you figures, for Tata Steel, total attrition is 4%. 4%. Right. So you need to have some attrition also, as it is said, so 4% I think is decent enough. If you look at in the younger lot, people in 0 to 3 years kind of period, there the attrition goes up to 7, 8, 9%. And I think this 7, 8, 9% is also much below the industry benchmark. But these are the people who are also looking for maybe higher education. They want to upgrade themselves. They have some other opportunity they get to see. Now, what attracts people to locations where we are there, we have difficulties. One, accessibility could be an issue. We have raw materials which are in the mine